Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Kestra PWS Services Out Loud. I'm Rob Bartenstein, CEO of Kestra PWS Services, and I'm joined today with one of our advisors, Kris Fu. Welcome, Kris.
Thank you, Rob. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Thanks for coming on the podcast. This is exciting.
Of course.
Kris is a podcast veteran, so this is going to be an easy one for him. Kris, why don't we just get started by just tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us where you came from, how long you've been in the business, how long you've been independent, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so I've been in the business for nearly almost 2 decades. Originally came from the bank channel with JP Morgan and came over to Kestra 2 years ago last Friday.
Yeah.
That was my anniversary.
Happy anniversary. Man.
Yeah, so I'm loving it. I'm loving the move, loving the style of what Kestra provides, for me to be a business owner. Mm-hmm. And learning to be a business owner was a whole new journey for me last year.
Right.
And that really sparked a lot of the podcasting, different ways of branding.
Yeah, so I that's one of the things that I think to me stands out about you is just the way that you've embraced that new kind of freedom that you have to brand your firm the way you want to and to do the kind of marketing that you want. So tell us a little bit about Maven Bridge and kind of maybe hit us with the philosophical element first and then take us into that part of it if you don't mind.
Sure. So, Maven Bridge, with a lot of the things that I do, I'm very intentional. So Maven Bridge, for me, is very near and dear because Maven is explained as a expert, connoisseur in your field. Mm-hmm. And I feel that as a financial advisor, it's not just about managing someone's portfolio. There's so many more nuances and intricacies that go into that.
Right.
So I really take that serious as far as being a maven in our industry.
Yeah.
And with the bridge, it's very common, but I feel we're the bridge for our clients from them reaching their financial goals, but also bringing about things that maybe they're not thinking about when it comes to goals, personal, business, financial. So really just trying to tie that into the brand is very important for me.
Yeah. And I think that really comes through and I sort of already spoiled the surprise, but you do a fair bit of podcasting. And what I've noticed is, well, first of all, it was fun to watch you stand that whole piece of your business up, right? Mm-hmm. You and I were in pretty constant contact as you were developing that concept and then kind of how it was going to work. And not that I was giving you a ton of guidance, you were just letting me know what you were doing, right? And I feel like you succeeded there, and then you got your feet under you, and then you've kind of evolved that over time as well. So why don't you just kind of take us through? Because I think if you think about people that are watching, very often it's folks that are still in an employee model, back at a wirehouse somewhere, and they're looking over the hedge and saying like, well, okay, I get it, cash flow is better, payouts higher, but like, really what's different, And I think part of what makes you really unique is the way you've embraced this piece of it. So just take us through the evolution of that whole podcasting thing and like what your intention behind it is and all that.
Yeah, just like you were saying earlier, before coming to Kestra, I think not the hesitancy, but there was not a lot of room to be able to do things like a podcast because you weren't really promoting yourself as a brand. But now being independent, the goal for me is to build my own personal brand as a person, but also for Maven Bridge. So I felt that with having a podcast, I love listening to podcasts in the first place. But I felt with having a podcast, it's a great marketing tool because a potential person that may be looking for a financial advisor doesn't necessarily have to meet you at a certain time, certain location to learn more about you if they're really just shopping around.
Right.
They can just listen to your podcast on their dime, on their time, and then get to know you personally, because a lot of what I do in my podcast is just kind of explore my knowledge, but put my own witty twist on it.
You know what, that part about getting to know you kind of at arm's length, I can really relate to, because as Scott and I travel around the country and meet with people that we've never met before, very often nowadays people will say, oh, I've watched your podcast. I feel like I know you guys, which is really cool. And that's really what we wanted. We wanted them to kind of at a risk-free sort of level, just at arm's distance or arm's length, decide whether we were even kind of the people that they might want to have dinner with, you know what I mean? And then we'll go on from there. But I'm sure, a lot of people watch the podcast and look at me and go, that's absolutely not the guy I want to hang out with. So cool. I never get to have to, or I never have to spend time with them, and they don't have to spend time with me either. But it is fun when people say, I've read your blogs and I've watched your podcast, and that was part of the reason I really wanted to get together with you guys. So I think it applies to you exactly the same way. Your clients are watching, or your future clients are watching and saying, yeah, that's the kind of guy that I want to be associated with. Your journey in the podcast, if I understand it correctly, and if I've observed it correctly, is you kind of went from more of a generalist approach to a more specific approach, right? So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I think that also works in tandem with my transformation as far as my business too. Because I went from being a advisor for everyone, where I wanted to work with more of a niche, which has helped a lot in just the podcasting and all the marketing that I do.
Yeah.
My niche is focusing on helping women, divorced, widowed women, as well as business owners. So having that niche really kind of in tandem also help with the podcasting too, to be a little bit more specific, more aware of kind of what my niche is, or things that I could be talking about that's going to be a lot more impactful as opposed to just general and broad.
Yeah, I feel like we talked about this when we were in the wirehouses. We talked about creating a niche or a segment or something like that. And, look, I think some people were able to do that in that environment. I freely admit that. I think most people have always struggled with that idea. And it feels like if I'm going to try to approach 10% of the market, I'm literally giving up 90%. I don't think that that's true, but I think that's human emotion and human nature that we feel that way.
Yeah.
So you were able to kind of discipline yourself to say, this is what I'm going to do. And as an independent, you can set the agenda, right?
Yeah.
So for your firm, for Maven Bridge, you're like, I don't have to worry about selling a checking relationship or selling a loan or anything like that. I can literally set the course here. And I think to me, that's kind of where the podcast becomes like the icing on the cake, because to your point earlier, you're introducing this stuff at arm's length where somebody can observe it and decide whether it's for them or not.
Exactly.
And then boom, they're kind of self-selecting into your segment.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, and that makes the job a lot easier, especially when they're reaching out to you, like you said, and they say, "Oh, I heard you on your podcast. I really like what you're talking about. Can I learn more about your services?" It's kind of already foot in the door, in so to speak,
right?
In a way.
Let's get into just some of the day-to-day of doing a podcast. Tell the listeners kind of how you go about that on a technical basis. You've had to build a studio kind of set up and do all that kind of stuff. Was that hard to do?
Not at all. And, I actually learned kind of about the process, because one of the things about Kestra is they're very supportive in advisor development. And I remember you telling me that before I was coming on board. But once I was here, it's like, man, there's a lot as far as development, which is great. So I was part of they call it the Ignite program. And it's a great program because it really got me out of my comfort zone, thinking about marketing strategy, getting on video, and really thinking outside of the box.
Yeah.
So with the podcast, we had one session where they were talking about, you don't have to get a nice mic like this if you don't want. You can just start with your iPhone and just start recording there, and then work your way up depending on how intricate or advanced you want your podcast to look.
Right.
So it was just a matter of trial and error and just building upon and seeing what works for me, and how can I get my message across.
Man, I'll tell you what, we don't always get everything right. Nobody does, but one of the things I think we've really gotten right is that Ignite program, and I'm really glad that you were a part of it, and all the advisors that have gone through it, I think, have discovered tons of value in terms of all of us come from the same place, right? There's the bull or there's the whatever brand that you're coming out of, and they don't want Kris Fu's name or brand image muddying up the waters for the brand that JP Morgan's got or whomever, right? So they just, no. The answer to all that stuff is no. You cannot do that. You cannot write a blog. You cannot have a podcast. You cannot have Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter or Instagram or any of that kind of stuff, right? We want the bull or whatever that brand is. So that Ignite program is literally like from a dead stop, how do we build you into a marketing engine if that's what you choose to do?
Yeah.
And you really grabbed that along with some other folks, really grabbed it with both hands. And we're going to be doing that program, I think more in, you were in the year-long program, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
I think we're going to shorten that up and try and condense it into maybe a half a year just because attention spans are tough to maintain for that long. But anyway, I'm really glad that you jumped in on that. The last thing I'll ask you about the podcast. So just very generally speaking, successful?
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I love it. I mean, just being here at Ascend, and I get a lot of my, fellow colleagues, saying, hey, great job on the podcast.
Yeah.
And for me, I don't think about it. I think about it just like, I enjoy doing it, but to hear, people that you aspire to be as well, it means a lot.
Yeah.
And it gives me even more confidence to continue to keep doing it and hopefully inspiring, some of my colleagues as well to do podcasting or something.
Isn't it just like where you came from, where your peers were always congratulating you? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't remember that either. That's so cool. That's one of the great things about all of us getting together like this a couple of times a year is we just get a chance to share. I love the fact that everybody here wants to see everybody else winning, and
exactly.
patting them on the back and saying like, you can do it and let's keep going. And there's a lot of mutual admiration and a lot of encouragement too.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say, and I tell this to a lot of people with Kestra, I feel like every advisor here is very high class.
Oh, that's nice.
It is very high class, and everyone is so nice and willing, to your point, willing to help.
Yeah.
I haven't met any advisor that has not, said hello, or just in our conversations, I feel like, okay, yeah, I definitely can learn from them too.
Yeah.
And vice versa.
That's really good.
Yeah.
That's what we're about. Okay, so just to change gears, and then I know we're getting short on time, but we did an interview with Matt West, who is near Atlanta, as you know, with Canton Wealth Partners, and they have literally they're in month 4. So they're just coming out the other side of the transition, right?
Yeah.
You're at 2 years. So think back to month 4 and then to where you are today. You've got a little bit more perspective on the whole thing, right? What would you tell folks that are looking over the hedge or the fence and thinking about trying to maybe make a move, but not really sure whether it's the right thing or whether they should or whatever?
Yeah. I mean, in all honesty, it's not easy.
Right.
It's difficult to get in at first, but I'm always getting asked, do you regret it? I'm like, no way. Mm-hmm. And I think that's common for a lot of advisors when they break away. I think, and the other answer that we give is, I wish I would have done it sooner.
Right.
So, but I think for me, it was just also that faith and belief that, yeah, it's going to be different. I won't have, the big brand behind me. But I think in today's world, consumers want things that are more personalized, specific. Mm-hmm. So if they can get something that's more personal or help from someone that's also personal themselves, I think that's a deeper connection for relationship building.
Yeah.
So that's something that I've learned over the last 2 years, as far as not just being an advisor anymore and working in the business,
right,
but it's also working on the business,
right?
Which for me, I embrace a lot. I love doing that part as well. Challenge, but I feel like I'm grown a lot in the last 2 years. So I would say for anyone thinking about it, it's worth it. You're going to get a lot of personal growth out of it too. Which I think is the most important thing.
That's awesome. I don't think I can follow that with anything. So we'll let it go there and wrap up here, Kris. Thanks a lot for your time today. Thanks for coming in. We appreciate it. It's always good to see you. And this is, doing this kind of stuff's just the absolute fun part. So
it was a pleasure. I appreciate having.
Thanks. Okay, well, that'll do it for us and another episode of Kestra Private Wealth Services Out Loud. If you'd like to watch this episode or any other episodes, you can always find us on the Kestra PWS website and or the Apple podcast site. Thank you. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.